Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. I want to start out by saying what this bill absolutely, positively, categorically does not do. There's been a lot of wildly inaccurate statements on this floor. This bill does not change our corporate income tax rates at all. This is not a tax bill. This bill does not raise taxes on Alaskan businesses by one dime. This bill does not increase costs to Alaskans by one dime. It does not increase the cost for Alaskan businesses by one dime. It does not cause companies to stop shipping in Alaska. Just one example of the wildly inaccurate statements that have been made on this floor. We heard a statement made by a member that a similar bill was passed in Maine and caused their prices to increase for Netflix. So I had my intern do a quick Google search, and in about 5 minutes, they found that that was not a change to the sort of tax that changes that we're proposing here, but rather that was a change to Maine's sales tax code. If you look at companies that do business, yes, if there is a sales tax, such as what the governor is going to propose, that would increase the costs. That would increase your costs. You will not find an example anywhere, where a similar bill has been passed to this that has increased costs. In fact, there's been research on this. For example, the National Bureau of Economic Research did a working paper entitled Corporate Taxes and Retail Prices and found quote, null, zero effects on prices for firms subject to a single sales factor. Null, zero. How is that possible? Corporate income taxes are very complex. Corporations apportion their income based on a whole series of different things, such as payroll, sales, property. They don't look at it at a state's individual corporate income tax. And again, I have a wonderful intern. UA provides really fantastic interns. And I had them just pull up a few items, okay? Because you would think, wow, Alaska's going to increase this. We're going to pass this bill, and you would think by the statements on this floor by some people that this is going to raise our prices. Well, we've got a 0% corporate income tax here in Alaska for out-of-state businesses. They pay nothing. You ship products into the state of Alaska right now, you're probably paying nothing. Whereas you go into a store in Alaska and they're at a competitive disadvantage. They're paying the corporate income tax. Yet these companies use our broadband. They ship the products into our state-funded ports or airports. They use our state-funded roads. When the roads need to be plowed, they're at least theoretically plowed by our state-funded DOT. If there's a lawsuit or workers' comp case, that goes to our state-funded courts. Our Alaskan businesses are paying that, Mr. President. These outside companies are paying zero. That's not fair to Alaskan companies. That's not fair to Alaskan consumers. This bill fixes that. But let's just look. And by the way, I've heard this. I think some people like to derogatively refer to this as the Etsy tax, right? And so we looked up, and what we found was Etsy, according to their global statistic, 97% of those who sell on Etsy sell out of their home. 97%. We know that 95% of the businesses in the United States are not C corporations. They're not C corporations. They're sole proprietorships, they're LLCs, they're S corporations. Guess what? This bill only applies to C corporations. This bill does not apply to 95% of the businesses in the United States. Of that 95%, the ones that are currently paying taxes to some other state, of that, they may end up paying, but they're probably already paying a corporate income tax to another state. So it would not result in a penny more for those corporations. Instead, it would result, as you've heard, of a shifting from other states' treasuries to the state of Alaska. But let's look at some of the prices, because I know that's one thing that we've heard. Oh, this is going to raise prices. Really? Well, let's look. Right now, you buy a snow shovel. I understand that in Juneau a couple of weeks ago, you couldn't buy snow shovels. They were sold out. And I asked my intern, well, what does it cost to ship a snow shovel to Alaska? And this is a Yokata snow shovel, aluminum, okay? Large capacity, we need large capacity here. $26.99 to ship it to Sitka. I don't know why they picked Sitka. Maybe they're thinking of the finance co-chairs. I guess they get some snow down there too. $26.99 to ship it to Sitka on Amazon, where we currently have a 0% corporate income tax. Now you would think, okay, wow, if companies are going to charge more for states where they have a corporate income tax that they're required to pay, they're going to add on a little bit more, right? Well, guess what? California, we know California has high taxes, right? Wow, the same price. It's the same exact price to ship it to California. Los Angeles, $26.99. I said, well, what about Minnesota? Minnesota is the highest corporate income taxes in the United States. Surely it's more in Minnesota, right? Surely it's more. Surely they're adding on 9.8%. Well, guess what? $26.99 in Minnesota. $26.99 in Dallas, Texas. I said, well, what if you buy a Gerber Gear strong arm knife, fixed blade, tactical knife? Surely they would charge a tax on that. Well, guess what? It's $99.95. Seems a little high, I don't know. $99.95 to ship it to Anchorage. It's also $99.95 to ship to Minneapolis, the highest corporate income tax in the United States. Just like it's $99.95 to ship it to Dallas, Texas, and $99.95 to ship it to Los Angeles. I said, well, what about a pair of boots? What about a pair of Under Armour Stellar mid-military tactical boots? Surely they must charge a corporate income tax increase for that. Well, guess what? $100 in Anchorage, $100 in Los Angeles, $100 in Minneapolis. There is no additional charge for a corporate income tax. And that's why 36, at least, other states do this. Now, I've heard comments, well, we haven't studied this enough, right? That's one we loved here. This was just introduced at the last minute. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. This idea was proposed by the governor. His own task force proposed this idea, not last year, not the year before that, not the year before that, but on August 5th, 2021. Okay? How many years ago is that? And at that time, the Revenue Commissioner, Lucinda Mahoney, told the Fiscal Policy Working Group, testifying that, quote, the governor would support this bill if it were passed by the legislature. This was not my idea. I wish I were smart enough to come up with an idea. I wish I even knew this was an issue. I had no idea this was even an issue. This was the governor's idea. This was his revenue commissioner's idea. 2021, we introduced the bill after the governor gave me a copy of it in 2023. That's 3 years ago. It didn't pass. Introduced it again on February 25th, 2025. Had multiple hearings, passed overwhelmingly, went to the House, passed overwhelmingly, bipartisan, and all of a sudden it becomes a political issue for some reason. You know, we get to make a decision in this body. Do we want politics or do we want policy? I don't know why some people have chosen politics on this, because it's not political in other states. That's the baffling thing about this bill. How is this a political issue? You can look at some of the most conservative states in the United States of America. This is not an issue. This is not, they don't make it politics in those states. They say, well, this is good policy. And just to give you a couple examples, Mr. President, and again, at least 37 states have used market-based sourcing. 38 states use single sales factor. Idaho. Idaho is not exactly known as a liberal bastion, okay? They have 86 Republicans and 19 Democrats. It's like 80%. They adopted both a single sales factor and market-based sourcing by a vote of 67-0 in the House and 33-0 in the Senate. Okay, let's move on to liberal Kansas, where just last year, 119 Republicans, 46 Democrats, they adopted, again, both. I heard some comments made, well, we don't know that some states do one or the other. No, we know. Kansas, a combined vote of 118-4 passed a very similar bill. Okay? Let's move on to liberal Arkansas, how about? Where they have their liberal governor, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who enacted a bill.
Speaker, respectfully, in the House, Mason's 122.2 and 124.3 prohibit impugning motives such as implying partisan motivation for voting as opposed to policy motivations.
Thank you, Representative Sider. Please take that. Senator Wielechowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not impugning anyone's motives. I'm simply noting that other extremely conservative states like Arkansas, where they have 110 Republicans and 25 Democrats, passed a similar bill to this, 96-0 in the House and 35-0 in the Senate. In fact, the Chamber of Commerce in Arkansas noted that the bill, quote, aligned Arkansas with other states. They recognized that 37 and 38 other states do something exactly the same. The Tax Foundation, the Arkansas Tax Foundation, a similar, very, very, very conservative organization, supported the bill because they recognized it put Arkansas at a competitive disadvantage not to have such a bill in place. Mr. President, I heard some comments made about, well, we can't do this because we don't have the regulations in place. You know, lots of concern about that. I wish the regulations were in place, but you know what? We don't have any guarantee that if the governor had signed this bill, the regulations would be in place by now either. Because guess what? We passed a carbon tax bill back in 2024, and the regulations still aren't promulgated yet. And, well, here's the kicker. Guess when companies would be required to pay their taxes for this bill? They wouldn't be required to pay the taxes for this bill until next year. The taxes are not due until May 15th, 2027. In fact, I asked legal about this. I said, is this a concern? Are you concerned that the regulations aren't in effect? Is this creating some problems? And I made a copy and I put it on your desk. And what they said was, in a memo dated yesterday, quote, because the Department of Revenue, or whoever, applies the tax laws, it will likely be the best source of information for how it intends to implement the bill. In other words, the Department of Revenue can implement this bill and work with taxpayers on it. But here's the kicker. They went on to say, remember, however, that taxes for 2026 will not be due until 2027, giving the department and taxpayers some time to determine how to implement this bill. The department and the taxpayers have a year and 4 months to figure out how this bill is going to be interpreted. A year and 4 months. That's plenty of time. And I'm glad to see that people are concerned about the business community. Again, this bill does not impact Alaskan businesses. This bill impacts outside corporations. In fact, the vast majority of Amazon companies are not C corporations. The largest sellers on Amazon, by the way, are Chinese companies. 57% of the largest companies are Chinese companies. Are we really voting no on this because we're worried about how this is going to impact the Chinese companies, Mr. President? Is that really why we're voting no on this? The legal issues that have been brought up, concerns about equal protection, those are baseless. Again, there's a memo on your desks. We asked Ledge Legal. There's no issues there. These are bills that have been passed in 37 and 38 other states. This is not controversial in other states. This is just not. And so we have an opportunity to collect some revenue, a big chunk of which will not even result in out-of-state companies paying more. It'll result in a shifting of revenue from other states' treasuries to Alaska. This will help Alaskan businesses. Actually, this will provide an incentive for high-tech companies to come to Alaska to do business. So, Mr. President, I don't know what else to say. If you think that collecting revenue from tech billionaires, which this bill does, before we collect from working Alaskans, which apparently we're going to hear proposals to do tonight, if you think it's better to collect revenue from tech billionaires than to go first to working Alaskans, you should vote yes on this bill. If you think we should be collecting revenue from Chinese corporations before we ask Alaskan residents to start paying a tax, you should vote yes for this bill. If you think it's unfair that Alaskan businesses are put at a competitive disadvantage because they pay the tax while outside corporations pay nothing, you should vote yes on this bill. If you think that we should start collecting from outsiders who are taking advantage of our structure and paying zero, and instead getting that money from somewhere else, like people's PFDs, you should vote yes for this bill. We've got a state to run. We have constitutional obligations to pay for our government. And when we let outsiders, tech billionaires, slip by and pay nothing, and how dare we go to Alaskans and say, we want to tax you, we want to take your dividend before we're going to collect revenue from tech billionaires? Really? Is that where we're going with this? You should vote yes on this, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wielechowski.